Salve to Skipoli, and welcome to part 3 of our noun videos. I do want to really quickly go back to something and talk about something that we were talking about in part 2 that I forgot to mention, and then we will move on to our third declension nouns and all that they entail. So let's jump into it. Okay, so really quickly, move me up here. Going back to these examples of our first and second declension nouns, I wanted to talk about the neuter nouns really quickly because those can cause some confusion because you start seeing that there are some of the same endings for different cases. So as we talked about in neuter nouns, they do have the same endings for nominative and for accusative. And you might be wondering, well, how am I supposed to tell the difference, which one it is in a sentence if word order doesn't matter? And we're going to talk more about that towards the end of this video. But in your context clues, it's usually going to be pretty obvious as to whether it's a nominative or accusative form. The other thing that can be tricky is this nominative first declension ending is an A, but then the neuter plurals for second declension also end in A. Again, this is going to be kind of a case where context clues will really point it out. But this is also a case where it becomes important to know your noun grammatical genders. So if you know that a noun is a neuter noun and that its main form, its nominative singular form, ends in a UM, if you see it with an A ending, you know that it's going to be a plural. Otherwise, right, it's going to be that nominative singular for the first declension endings. So just kind of keep that in mind. There will be cases where there are multiple noun cases that have the same endings, and it can be a little confusing, but most of the time the context clues of the sentence will kind of clear that up for you. So I did just want to point out that little note if you're wondering, wait, how am I supposed to tell the difference between these? It'll usually be fairly obvious, and again, knowing your vocabulary, knowing those grammatical genders, those will also help out a lot as well. Okay, now moving on to part 3, where we are getting, what did I do? I'm getting into our third declension noun endings. So third declension nouns are the trickiest bunch of the declensions that we are learning at the moment. Third declension nouns can be masculine or feminine or neuter. So that it's not really more often one or the other, it can be any of them. And it can be sometimes hard to know which one it is. The nominative singular ending of third declension nouns is where things get a little wonky, is because there's a whole bunch of different options for what the nominative singular ending can be in third declension. But that whole bunch of variations of endings can give you some clues about the noun's grammatical gender. So we're going to talk about that. There we go. So here is our chart for our third declension noun endings. As I said, in our nominative singular, we got a whole bunch of ending options there. And so I believe this covers all of the options for our noun endings for nominative singular third declension. We have ER, OR, S, O, X, L, A, N, C, E, or T. So these are our options for what the nominative singular ending might be for a third declension noun. Something to tell if it's a third declension noun is if it doesn't end in a US, or a UM, it's probably third declension. However, as you can see, there are some third declension nouns that do end in A, and there are third declension nouns that end in S. So it's not always going to help you out, but that can be a good clue. Now, the other endings are different. The plural, nominative plural, is going to always end in a long ES, and then the accusative singular will end in EM, and the accusative plural will end in a long ES again. So this is another case where the nominative and the accusative, in the plural at least, are going to have the same ending. But as I mentioned, context clues will usually clarify which one they are doing in a sentence. So you may notice in this chart, I've kind of grouped these endings into 3 little groups. And this is where we get into sort of a helpful hint to guessing what grammatical gender a noun is. Again, this is going to be more important when we start introducing adjectives into the fray, but it is helpful to start kind of getting the hang of these now. So really quickly, third declension noun or singular, there's a little trick to telling the grammatical gender of these. There are exceptions to this guideline, but it still is helpful for the most part. And usually the exceptions are logical ones. So if a third declension noun ends in ER or OR, it is usually or often going to be masculine. Now, for our stage 1 vocabulary, we see the words mater for mother and pater for father. These are both third declension nouns. They both end in ER, but pater obviously will be masculine, and mater is one that ends in ER, but it is a feminine noun. And this is one where I'm saying where it's logical. Usually when you're talking about people, when you have words for people in Latin, the grammatical gender will match the gender of that person. So it makes sense that the word for mother in Latin would be feminine, even though it has that ER ending. That is often going to be a third declension masculine ending, if that makes sense. So socks is the clue for feminine. So we have error, socks, and then the last one will be lancet. So error, socks, or lancet. Error, EROR, is going to be our clue for masculine. Socks, if it ends in S, O, or X, is usually going to be feminine. Again, there are examples. One noticeable exception to this one is the Latin word for king, which is rex, R-E-X. But again, it's the word for king, so it makes sense that that word would be masculine. And then lancet, L-A-N-C-E or T, words that end in any of these letters in the third declension are often going to be neuter. So again, there's going to be exceptions to this, but this is kind of a good guideline to go for if you're not sure about something. So just kind of write this down in your notes to save for later, because when we get to adding adjectives in, this is going to be very helpful. So error, socks, or lancet are our options for nominative singular, third declension. But like I said, the other endings are pretty standard. We have the plurals are long ES, and then the accusative singular is going to be EM. Okay, moving on. So some examples of third declension words, just giving you a couple of examples of these words with these different endings. So we have the word pater. As I said, this is our Latin word for father. It's that ER ending. And then in the accusative, we have patrem. Now, this is the other kind of tricky thing about third declension is a lot of times the stem of the word will change a little bit from the nominative singular to all the other forms. So this is one of those reasons as to why when we learn Latin words, we learn those multiple forms, like in their dictionary entries. So for example, the word for father in Latin, if you see it in the Latin dictionary, it will be listed as pater patri, pater patris masculine. The reason that it has that second form there, that patris form, it's actually the genitive form, store that in your brain for later on, is because that's going to give you the stem of the word. That PATR is the stem onto which you actually add the rest of the endings. So we get rid of kind of this E between the T and the R in this word. So it goes from pater to patrem, patres, and patres. So this is why, kind of bringing things together of why I'm having you guys, when you learn the vocabulary, learn those multiple forms, because they're helpful with knowing the stems and to help form the different endings and things like that. So there is a reason behind the madness, I promise. So this is, again, a masculine word. It's the word for father, so it makes logical sense that it's going to be masculine. Then we have the word canis. Canis is our word for dog. Again, this one is actually going to have the same two, it's going to look the same in the first and second forms that are listed. It's going to be canis, canis. And then this one can actually be both masculine or feminine. This is one of the rare examples in which there's a couple Latin nouns that the gender of the noun will kind of depend on the gender of the animal or person. The word for baby does this too, but there's only a couple of them that do this. So canis, right, our word for dog, becomes canem when it's in the accusative, a direct object. And then again, in the plural, the accusative and the nominative are the same. It's canes, right? Canes. And again, context clues will help you figure out whether it's the subject or a direct object in a sentence. Okay, so I wanted to kind of do a couple of practice sentences to show you guys why these endings are important, how they kind of work. So going back to my favorite example sentence, we have the dog bites the man. Again, we have the dog as our subject, the man is our direct object, and then bites is our verb, obviously. Again, English is a language that relies on word order to give meaning, so if we change the word order, the man bites the dog, right? That different ordering of the words changes the meaning of the sentence. Now in Latin, as I said, meaning comes from word forms and endings. So if I have the sentence, the dog bites the man, in an English word order, canis mordet virum. So we have canis here. This is a third declension noun, like we just saw. This is in its nominative singular form. So it is the subject. And then we have virum. This is one of those second declension nouns that ends in an R that I was telling you about. The word for man, vir, and the word for boy, puer, are two nouns in the second declension that end in R in the nominative singular, but have all the same endings as the other second declension nouns. So virum, that um ending, is our second declension accusative singular ending. So this is the direct object. Now, since the endings tell us what they're doing in the sentence, I can rearrange these words in pretty much any way I want, and the sentence is still going to mean the same thing. So I have the sentence, virum, oh, typo here, virum mordet canis, right? Even though I've rearranged the words, this sentence still means the dog bites the man, because canis, our word for dog, is still in its nominative subject ending, and virum is still in its direct object accusative ending. So it doesn't matter that we've moved the words around, this sentence still means the dog bites the man. Now we have mordet canis virum. Again, I've rearranged the word order. Meaning doesn't change. Canis is still our subject. Virum is still our direct object. But one more? Okay. So the point I'm trying to make is theoretically, you can put words in any order in Latin that you want, and you still be able to tell what the meaning is because of the endings. The word order is not where it gets the meaning from. Word order can affect like emphasis in a sentence. Like if I really want to emphasize the direct object, like the dog bites the man, like he's not biting like a girl or a boy, he's biting a man, then I might put the direct object at the beginning. If I want to change the meaning, though, if I want to change the sentence to the man bites the dog, I have to change the endings of those nouns. So I have to change the word canis from its subject nominative form to its accusative direct object form. So that's where we have canem, that em, third declension, accusative singular ending. And then vir is now our subject, right? We want the man to bite the dog. I mean, we don't want that, but that's what we're trying to get the new sentence to say. We have vir, this is going to be our subject ending. And again, this is that second declension noun that ends in an R, but this is still a subject ending. So even though the order of this in English looks like the dog bites the man, the sentence does mean the man bites the dog. Okay? Quick note, I'll move my face so you can read the note. There are guidelines for word order in Latin. These kind of go out the window in poetry that you'll deal with in like much later levels of Latin. But typically in Latin, the subject will be before the direct object. And then something that is different, though, is that Latin often likes to have its verbs at the end of a sentence or clause. So usually, right, the actual nice way to write this sentence in Latin would be canis virum mordet. That would actually be kind of the standard way to have that sentence be in Latin, where you have the subject first, then the direct object, and then you have the verb. So, to kind of summarize things, nouns have different cases depending on their function in a sentence. different endings depending on their function in a sentence. Those are the cases. So far we've learned nominative and accusative, right? Nominative case used for the subject, accusative case used for a direct object, okay? And then nouns belong to groups that are called declensions that just follow a similar pattern for how their endings change based on their case, okay? I know this is a lot of information I've thrown at you guys. Again, for those of you who were here last year, hopefully this was a pretty thorough review of your nouns. For those of you who are new, if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, that's okay. I just threw a ton of new information at you. So just watch the videos, take some notes. I'm gonna have some practice exercises for you. Please email me if you have any questions, and we will be going over this in our Zoom meetings too and doing a lot more practice with these things. So just take a deep breath. These are Latin nouns. We're going to be learning more of them and doing a lot more practice with these as we go on. But this is what we have for now. So hopefully this wasn't too crazy. Again, please email me if you're having any concerns or questions about this. And I will see you in our next Zoom. I don't think there were any other things. Yes, that's the end of our presentation. All right, Wale te discipuli. I will see you next time.